Hello and welcome to the most expensive guide to make, that is the PTRS guide. In this one we will be looking at a bunch of stuff, so use timestamps to get the parts you deem relevant. The standard build of PTRS is Leonov, Monster Bullet and Mesh Sights. Everything else isn't necessary and even the bullet can be dropped depending on the preference. Costs are relatively low. Stock bullet is 1.32, Leonov Monster is 5 and Mesh Sights are 16.8 per shot. The gun itself costs 2.5 credits per shot, and in case you are wondering, the Bronya Max is 3.2 credits per shot, which makes it a very efficient gun to use and spam even against tanks to make credits, especially since other Soviet options are not great. If you want to make bank, dropping the sights might be a good idea, but then you would have to deal with more sway, so it's a bit of a choice. So the tooltip in game shows that Leonov Bronya Max has more damage than other bullets, and even though it does by 50%, the damage to tanks is a separate thing entirely, so essentially that extra damage is only against infantry, which is not useful, because even the stock bullets are already one-shots to any body part. So what are the actual differences that are tangible? In short, stock ammo has worse penetration and damage values, Leonov Bronya has best penetration and okay damage values, and Leonov Monster has a bit more variance on penetration but the most damage. Recoil is the highest with Leonov Monster bullet, and Leonov Bronya has the most confire. So against more armored tanks, Bronya Max has slightly more consistent penetration, but I don't think it's worth the sacrifice in damage and confire, so that's why I recommend the Leonov Monster bullet. But if you're going against only infantry and not gonna play against tanks, or you're not using the PTRS against tanks, then going with the stock bullet is the choice for you, because the recoil and the confire, and actually the maintenance, is much better with the stock bullet. In my opinion, triggers are not worth the cost because of a couple of reasons. One of them is that the gun sway is already really high, another is that the smoke generated by the gun is too high, so most of the times you can't make use of the rate of fire. However, if you use the gun only against tanks, it is a decent option since the targets are huge, so smoke and confire is not that much of an issue. And if you're really good at guessing where the enemy is, I guess you can run the stock bullet and the trigger, but that is very niche build. For badges, it really depends on what you want to achieve with the gun. Infantry First right now is broken and works on any armor thickness for some reason. Although we haven't bug fixed the badge, so maybe it's working as intended. Fast reload is also very good, because reloading takes 7 seconds, which is rough, to say the least. When I have veteran membership, I run both of them, sacrificing heavyset. However, running something like sights only and fast reload with heavyset might be a good anti-infantry build. But what about Deadeye or Tight Grip, you might ask? Well, I did some tests, but the results were inconclusive because it's hard to evaluate guns with high confire. But from what I can see, Deadeye or Tight Grip doesn't help much. PTRS is an anti-tank rifle, so obviously it can dispatch of tanks. However, it is weird to say the least since armor model currently in the game is wonky. Knights from my testing can be killed in 4 shots, but since I have only infantry silver, I suspect 3 shot kills are possible. But usually it takes more shots since confire is a bit of a pain with the gun. Mediums can be killed in 5 shots, but it's not very consistent and most of the time takes upwards of 3 magazines if we miss internal components entirely. Heavies cannot even be penetrated from the front, sides or back unless armor is worn down, which is annoying to say the least. However, a good approach to heavies is getting up on top of the turret and shooting the engine compartment, since that is not well armored, and will take around 2 magazines to kill even the most armored tank in the game, Tiger 2, which is actually quite manageable. This also works pretty well with lower tier tanks, but the problem is they're a bit faster, so the success rate is, well, varied to say the least. PTRS is certainly a fun gun to use, but before shooting anything with it, be sure to change gun zeroing since it defaults to 200 meters, which is not optimal. Do that with the mouse wheel or looking at a close object, and pressing space to zero in on the distance between you and the target. PTRS is pretty effective against planes, especially the recon planes, and because it's pretty cheap, it's relatively profitable as well. Be sure to be around houses so you don't get bombed or cheat well. And if you think the bipod is an option, most of the times it's not worth it unless camping a corner or fighting a Hetzer, since Hetzer machine gun has a limited depression.
My heart, don't wanna feel your touch like ice tracing